Hey, I'm Justin,
And I'm Myra.
and today we're going to speak about the fact that it's difficult, but it makes your darkest fears disappear. Now, what it is that we're speaking on here is igniting the courage to actually look at your blind spots. Why? We're doing this because what happens when we don't look at our blind spots?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, the blind spots, because they existed there for like maybe years, maybe decades, and you've gotten used to them. And so therefore it does take courage to look like what's hidden there in the dark and what's preventing you from moving forward.
What's hidden in the dark? Jordan Peterson says that you shouldn't hide unwanted things in the fog. The first time I heard that, I didn't really grasp or see at all what he was hinting at. But, right, if you're aware of the fact that there are unwanted things in your life, well, then the fog isn't there, and at least you can see them. But to ignite the courage that's necessary to have the capacity to see through the fog. Now, this is built off an honesty, a willingness to sort of question, to even ignite some skepticism in the way that you live on a daily basis. To just begin to start asking some quality questions. Just in relationship to, am I living in a mechanical way? Like, this was one of the biggest pain points for me, and I don't think I'm alone, which is getting comfortable living a life which is low quality. Can you want to expand upon that?
Oh yeah. This is there's this frog in the hot water analogy. I have no idea if this is real or not, but when you put a frog in cold water and heat it up very slowly, the frog won't jump out and just dies at some point. While when you throw the frog into hot water, the frog will jump out because it realizes, that's dangerous, I'm going to die. And this is exactly, I feel, what can happen because you get so used to living a life that's not aligned with you. And then little things over time add up. How do you feel about this?
Right. I was just making a note because that phrase, that analogy, and then I hear you say, I don't know if it's real or not. Well, we do know. And of course, I see that you were speaking in relationship to the frog doing the jump. But if we're making the analogy, we know that we've been that frog before. And therefore, we know that it is real. That when all those small things, they seem small, we become complacent, we don't question, maybe we fuel ourselves with, low quality ingredients, and then maybe we consume a lot of entertainment, and we run and we avoid. Well, those are all that's the warming of the water, slowly. And inevitably, if you're willing, if you have a little courage inside, you're going to ask yourself some questions. And one of those main questions may be, how much pain am I willing to tolerate? And, it can feel tricky. It can feel as if you don't feel the pain when that water is slowly boiling instead of a instant increase in temperature. And when you're numbing yourself and over-consuming and suppressing and distracting, and you're doing all of that consistently every day, you might not even realize how much pain you're in. And that was sort of my life. That was my story for a bit. And then inevitably I just had to ask, I was sitting there in the summer shed, my high school senior year, and my friends and I, we good friends. We would play football, we would drink, we would do, entertain ourselves. But I remember sitting there, and we're all just silent, and we're all just numbed out of our minds. And I asked myself this question, like, is this all there is to life? I couldn't get away from that question in that moment. Is this all there is to life? How much pain am I willing to tolerate, right? And having that skepticism, just to start to ask yourself questions. What type of domino effect can that start?
Yeah, I feel this so much. I've been there too, but it took me longer. And I feel this is the case for many people. Also, after decades of shitty decisions, because that's what it is, they stack up, and then another bad thing enters your life, something else enters your life you don't like, and then you're like, hey, I'm 40, and how did my life end up like this? And this question. And the reason is because you haven't raised your standards. On the contrary, you have lowered your standards on the way. And when you lower your standards, then the decisions you make become poorer and poorer. And on the other hand, this is the wake-up moment, and this is the decision. This is the one decision, if you'd like to apply Pareto here, this is the one decision that can change your entire trajectory. The decision to raise your standards, because this means in every moment of life where you have to make a decision, you ask yourself, is this aligned with my purpose? Is this aligned with how I'd like to live my life? Is this aligned with my standards? With my new high standards? And if the answer is yes, you can do it. And if the answer is no, then don't, because else you go down this path of, okay, then I just take on another shitty thing, and one more. Well, one more can't hurt, can it? Yeah, it can. You see, and this is the compounding thing. And yeah, I've been there too. I just woke up and was like, really, how did I get here? And this was the reason.
Right, our conclusions derived from a place of confusion will compound that confusion. And when we look at standards, we touch on this frequently, which is the essence of a program, or of the people pleasing, or what is behind conforming, right? And the idea of raising our standards, something that we have to attend to here, is what's the root behind the raising of our standards, right? Are we raising our standards to fit in? Are we raising our standards to conform, to chase something that has been installed in us from the external, right? Are we raising our standards for a shallow root? Or do we see so clearly that there's a way of living which has brought us to a certain place in which we cannot no longer proceed, right? And if you see that place so clearly, you're going to be the one who naturally chooses your standards. You're going to create standards authentically in alignment with who you are. And there's a big difference from being disciplined in relationship to something you heard someone else say just because it sounded good and they have a status and you might want to imitate them. There's a big difference between that and truly being your own authority because you know thyself, because you've asked yourself the questions, because you've installed skepticism in your heart, and therefore you have the clarity to create your own standards. And those standards, the ones that are founded upon clearly knowing who you are, those standards will be priceless, and they'll be natural, and they'll be effortless standards. It's not even about becoming something different, but taking off the shackles which prevent you from seeing who you are. Because you know who you are. But we do run and avoid and distract ourselves from who we are because it can be painful to take the mask off.
Yeah, those are such good points. And this is also where the courage comes in. You know, you were talking about in the beginning. And so just looking and having the courage to build your own, not even to build, because your own standards are already there. All you need to do is connect with them. And now I feel the question is arising, like how can I identify them? And this is, of course, you can start by looking outside if you're completely disconnected. And then you can apply standards that other people you admire have, and then feel how you feel. And this is kind of like a test to check if is this a standard that's aligned with me or isn't it? And then when you get deeper and deeper into this process, you realize more and more, oh yeah, those are my standards, because they pop up sometimes silently but still noticeable. And this is where a raised awareness can help. And there's this inner feeling of, oh yeah, that's a good fit. Oh yeah, this feels so right. And there's no friction. There's no friction inside of you. If you are aligned with something, with a decision, every cell of your body is telling you so. And this is why awareness is so valuable, because then you can simply listen.
And it's interesting, right? When I hear you say that, like, every cell in your body knows, but this is the reality. And the tricky part about it is that, you know, there's fog that we create. We choose to jump into the mud. And once we start to see clearly how we are creating that fog, or we are deliberately, maybe not consciously, but we are deliberately walking into the mud. When we start to become more honest with ourselves, then, you know, there's a little bit more space to hear what I'd label that gentle flute, which will guide you in relationship to your standards. And it's like, okay, you can look at one thing practically, like, who were you as a child? If you ever had moments in your childhood where you sort of were just there. Like for me, as to put it simply, I was always running around. I was always outside, and I played a lot as a kid. And now I see clearly that that's part of my standards for my life, of who I am. I don't always have to be running around, but I do need to be consistently in motion, consistently attending to my mind psychologically, and, you know, staying active physically. Like, that's just part of my standards, who I am. Like, not the difference, but maybe more the contrast in quality of life when, you know, walking consistently versus not walking consistently. It's something so simple, but you can feel it, you can see it, and you can watch it. So, you know, again, for me, from 0 to 7, whatever, I was always playing. So how can you, if you were playing a lot as a kid, whether it was with computers or with other kids, how can you integrate play into your life right now? And one practical thing, if it makes sense in your life, is to have animals around you, because animals are playful by nature, and they're going to bring that playfulness out of you if you aren't too stuck in deliberately stepping in the mud and living in fog. Being the sad truth about homeowners and animals is that so many people don't have the real relationship that they could with animals. Why? it's the same thing as we've been talking about. Once you have the courage to have the capacity to bring attention, well, not bring attention, but to attend to your emotions, your thinking, your mind and its movements, when you have that courage, you're going to show up as a more alive individual for your animals. And therefore, you'll see that they're consistently inviting you to play. It's a beautiful thing. Your life is going to completely change if you do this work. And one thing I'll say is, don't believe me. Question that. See, is he for real? Do the work. Do the work and see. Because, I can talk about this. We can invite you to inquire. We can invite you to do the work, but I can't do the work for you. And therefore, I'm talking about your life. Because I know where I'm at, and I know the clarity, the smoothness, the contrast in what I used to live and now what I live. And it's all possible for you. It truly is. So if you enjoyed this, I know you'll like daily writings. I'm going to link both mine and Myra's newsletter. I'm writing daily. I digress, she's writing often. She'll get to the daily point, right? And if you're on the podcast, if you're on YouTube, I would love to hear, any nuggets. What did you find most valuable? And bottom line is, rating, review on podcast, share it with a friend, YouTube. We're both grateful. Thank you. Anything else from you?
You said this beautifully. I'm grateful too, and thank you for listening.